Oklahoma State fans may not be in Provo, Utah levels of panic at the moment, but there are some current commits that are now being told to reopen their commitments. We should all just woo-saw, let it breathe a little bit, and see where it might lead.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are we feeling, my Big 12 brethren and BYU brethren out there? Shout out to the regulators. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your top stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we're partially brought to you by Game Time Tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Get squared away with Game Time Tickets today. Meanwhile, we get to slide into the instability conversation. Yes, you've likely seen some of the social media posts in regards to current commits like Aiden Martin reopening their commitment because they're being told to do so. Unfortunately, that's not the only casualty, but a lot of these conversations are stemming from Raj Murti himself, the general manager that is coming over from North Texas. And in my personal opinion, if he's the one making these decisions, A, it's because Eric Morris needs it to happen. And B, it's all about the fiscal responsibility that he's bringing over from North Texas. One of the biggest things about Raj is the fact that he was operating with the smallest American budget in that conference, and yet they have the best product on the football field. I don't love losing some guys like Aiden Martin, especially being an Oklahoma dude. I don't love the prospect of potentially losing out on a KD Batman Jones, even if he did, commit to KU, in my opinion, a little bit too early. There's going to be some other individuals. From a talent perspective, this new coaching staff does bring in a lot of consideration from in-state recruits, but at the same point in time, we have to take into consideration. So, for instance, if we were to tell Katie Batman Jones, hey, we're still going to recruit you, but feel free to kind of keep your options extremely open, that probably means we're trying to invest heavily in Rodney Fields, and naturally they would like Caleb Hawkins to join the fold. So if you're trying to invest in the current Oklahoma State running back, the current North Texas running back, and you've already identified in the recruiting process that this up-and-coming senior in high school is the next iteration of what you need in your backfield, I'm okay with it. Do I love it? No. But at the same point in time, they've probably already established a decent number of relationships with the recruits they feel like are going to be beneficial inside their system. So just like we're going to have some players that I absolutely hate to see leave Oklahoma State, there's going to be some players in the recruiting cycle that we do miss out on. It's been a wonderful story to see some of the guys that decommitted when Mike Gundy was let go and then recommit within the last couple games or so. But at the same point in time, if they don't already have an established relationship with Eric Morris and his staff, or if Eric Morris and his staff has identified that potential target not being a good fit for their system, then it is what it is. This is one of those moments where we have to trust Raj Murti. We have to trust what the new coaching staff is going to bring to the fold, just like we had to trust Chad Weiberg to get this done. And it appears as though he's done a great job, from David Taylor, J.C. Hoyt, Steve Lutz, now Eric Morris. If he is, in fact, bringing an exorbitant amount of the talent with him from North Texas to Oklahoma State, I understand fiscally that Raj Murti is going to not only factor in the recruiting cycle, they're going to factor in the players they want to keep. They're going to factor in the players they want to bring. So unfortunately, there's going to be casualties both in the recruiting and on the current roster that a lot of us do not want to see happen. Same could be said about the coaching staff, right? Guys like Jules Montanar and I think even to some degree Corey Patterson, definitely Clint Bowen, absolutely Ryan Osborne. All of those dudes have proved that they deserve to be at this level, coaching in the positions that they do. Unfortunately, likely part of this negotiation to obtain the services of Chad Morris was, oh, and by the way, I'm going to bring 95% of my staff with me because they already know what the cohesiveness should look like inside the locker room. They already know fundamentally what I'm trying to get from an execution standpoint. They know precisely what we're looking at in the development room. And again, if you're talking about a dude that is developed the guys like John Mateer and Cam Ward and Baker Mayfield and obviously Drew Mestamaker, we should all embrace whatever decisions are being made. Raj Murda had what, a couple $1 million to play with at North Texas. There's been some indications kind of, in the channels that we anticipate trying to spend up to $18 million on this upcoming NIL roster. Obviously, that has nothing to do with the coaching contracts and the buyouts for the current coaches that are going to be leaving Stillwater, so on and so forth. But as it pertains to directly paying the players, there seems to be a consensus that we would like to be in that 15 to 18-ish million range. Raj Murti has never had that kind of money at his disposal. So the fact that he's now going to be able to orchestrate within a significantly bigger budget, if he was able to produce a 10-1, potentially 11-1 roster with only $2 million to work with, imagine what that dude can do with 15 million, 18 million, heck, even the 13 million that we basically spent this season. If North Texas had $13 million invested into their roster, they probably would be in a completely different position. They'd probably be undefeated. They'd probably have a bunch of draft pick dudes readily available. Thankfully for us, a lot of the projected draft pick guys are the freshmen and sophomores that you would assume would likely get a very solid sales pitch on why they should follow to Stillwater. And again, if Drew Messamaker didn't even play in high school and nobody wanted him, and it took Jeff Christensen to reach out to Eric Morris, then Eric Morris was really the only coach that had some semblance of an ability to compete for a playoff spot to give him an opportunity. You would think that guy would follow his head coach. Same could be said about Caleb Hawkins. 6'2", 205 pounds out of Shawnee, Oklahoma, but Oklahoma State didn't want him. OU didn't want him. KU didn't want him. His best offer coming out of high school was essentially UCO. So all of us missed on Caleb Hawkins. So that's, again, why I'm saying if any of the running backs, including the freshman running back, DJ Duggar, if any of those individuals are assessed differently than the current Oklahoma State staff or the previous Oklahoma State staff, we just have to embrace the fact that there is going to be a little bit of turmoil. Turmoil equals turnover. Turnover equals at least a little bit of instability or the sight of instability. I don't necessarily view it that way because look what they did with $2 million. Like, I think that Eric Morris, the whole package deal with Skylar Cassidy and Coach Davis on the offensive side of the ball and bringing over this general manager is going to do absolutely wonders for Oklahoma State in this upcoming roster. You would assume, like, if they were to bring, say, 40% of their current roster at North Texas, and you were to merge that with, say, 25%, whatever the case may be, of the current Oklahoma State roster with the upcoming recruiting cycle, they're going to get Oklahoma State to a position that we're at least somewhat competitive for a bowl game next year. And the beauty of Drew Messamaker, because nationally some people are going to say, well, you're getting a quarterback from North Texas who didn't even play in the high school, so why would you guys expect to have a winning record or a 500 record year one? It's because of that Jeff Christensen factor. The dude that developed a lot of these quarterbacks that are very widely known, currently working with Ty Simpson, Dylan Raiola, right? Even before, he's worked with Baker Mayfield. He's worked with Patrick Mahomes, Kirk Cousins. The list goes on and on. He called Eric Morris and said, hey, I've got a future NFL dude on my hands. You have to come check him out. And Eric Morris even said, you're giving me a guy that couldn't even play in high school, but evidently there's a little bit of an interesting backstory on why he didn't get a lot of opportunities in high school. And listen, a lot of us have probably seen this. A lot of us have probably seen in our high school or even college playing days that some of the better players were kind of buried on the depth chart. And sometimes it had nothing to do with football stuff, right? Maybe they like a little bit too much of the wacky tobacco off campus. Maybe they like to jump in on the kegerator festivities a little bit too much. They might run a 4.3 40. They might be 6'2", 220. But if they're not doing everything that they're supposed to do, or there's anything in the checks and balances system that doesn't add up, we're not gonna gamble. All right, before we skedaddle over here to segment 2, I did want to read something coming directly from Raj Murti. This was in this previous season. He was asked a question. Your roster budget is less than $2 million, which is near the bottom of the American Conference. Yet at this point in time of the article, you are 8-1. How did you build a winning roster with such a small budget? Raj said, you just don't overpay. You keep your priorities, you keep your values. You don't get big-eyed in the heat of the moment. You keep your composure and understand that this is all part of it. If another school wants to overpay for somebody, you've got to have a number that you like. I'm not going to go higher than this particular number. As long as you have some kind of thought process and your thought process aligns with your evaluation process, which then aligns with your evaluation process and how you all pay them. AKA, they're not going to get in a bidding war all that often. There will be moments. They're going to pick and choose the guys that they plan on essentially getting to a bidding war with. But even then, there's going to be a set number. And if the set number exceeds what they believe is going to fit into their mold, they're not going to pull the trigger. They're going to do what they've done in the last 24 hours, which is tell some guys, hey, love you, respectfully, you should probably reopen your commitment. Or, I mean, you should look to recommit elsewhere. It's all comes down to fiscal responsibility, and you have to appreciate that. If he is going to get 15, 18, whatever million, and he's already making educated decisions on what the current roster should look like, predicated upon the success that he's had already at North Texas with Coach Eric Morris, we should all be up in arms, excited about them running this entire operation in a very professional manner. Is it what we're used to? No, not exactly. Is it going to rub some of us wrong with some of the guys that leave or don't get offers or end up, flipping a commitment? Absolutely. But you have to look at it holistically. I have faith that Chad Weiberg made all of his due diligence known from the get-go, and he knows what he's getting in the product that is Eric Morris and the staff, including the general manager. So if they're making decisions, you have to look at their success rate. And if they can do it with $2 million, we should all take solace in the fact that if he's anywhere near 15 to 18 mil, we're instantaneously going to be at least 500 competitive. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to experience all that is encompassing with the World Cup coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be absolutely massive. But you got to be honest, getting tickets to something that huge is probably going to be a fairly difficult process. We like to equate it sometimes to it's more difficult to battle for your tickets than to watch the battle on the field, or as they would say in this sport, on the pitch. Game time tickets alleviates a lot of that for you. So you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats are opening. You can buy tickets in a moment just by simply hitting the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of, impossible. All you do is pull up the app, and the layout makes it so simplistic. You scroll through the matches, and you compare seat views. You pick a game, tap a section, and have your tickets locked in within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for fine print. Prices include fees up front, which you're going to absolutely love. No last-second surprises at checkout. So take the guesswork out of you buying World Cup tickets, and every match, concert, game, event near you with Game Time tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, download the app, create an account, use that code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off. It's simple. You swipe, tap, ticket, and go to Game Time tickets. Speaking of the respect factor when it comes to Eric Morris and Raj Murdy, and how we all just need to breathe a sigh of relief and take solace in the fact that they've had so much success doing what they're doing. If you open up the piggy banks, there's no telling what heights they could bring Oklahoma State to. Mike Gundy did a phenomenal job kind of setting the building blocks for what we need. As Oklahoma State fans, we need 8 to 10 win seasons. We need to be able to compete for Big 12 titles. Thankfully, Mike Gundy gave us a lot of that, and Eric Morris has now given that to North Texas. I love that he's not doing the Lane Kiffin thing, just like Alex Galesh. They're going to continue to coach their football team while building everything they need to at Oklahoma State. They can legitimately get North Texas into the playoffs, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in segment 3. But Eric Morris is still, to some degree, getting disrespected. I saw a deal yesterday, CFB Budge or something to that effect on X, put out the best when it came to all of the coaching hires, and he gave grades Here was the grades. Jim Mora, number 1, the best hire in America. He gave him an A+. John Summerall going to Florida. Jim Mora, obviously, leaving UConn, going to Colorado State, A+. John Summerall, leaving to go to Florida, A+. Lane Kiffin, doing what he did in the middle of the night to Ole Miss to take the LSU job. He has a number 3 as an A. Then South Florida coach who was up for the Oklahoma State job, but seemingly we decided to pick Eric Morris instead. Alex Golesh is number 4 here with an A-. And then at number 5 for Oregon State, Jamarcus Shepard gets a B+. Then at Stanford, Tavita Pritchard gets a B. And then 7th place, Eric Morris gets a C+, followed by Pat Fitzgerald taking over at Michigan State. Ryan Silverfield, also one of the candidates likely for the Oklahoma State job, taking over at Arkansas, C-, number 9. And then Pete Golding, number 10, as a D. There was another podcast. I meant to take a screenshot of the podcast I was watching. Evidently, I did not do that. But I was watching a podcast, and I went through the whole 19 minutes or whatever it was, waiting on the guy's opinion on Eric Morris, and it never happened. Eric Morris was never even mentioned as one of the best hires of this coaching cycle. That is absolutely mind-blowing to me, because if you look at somebody like a John Summerall, yeah, really cool story, taking over for Willie Fritz. He's done a lot of magical things at Tulane. Same could be said about Alex Golesh. But at the end of the day, none of them are performing quite to the same levels as Eric Morris, right? G.J. Kinney, he was a very hot commodity, then he underperformed. Alex Golesh, very hot commodity, not necessarily has underperformed per se, but they do have a multitude of losses this year. John Summerall is a little bit of a different story. But when you look at the statistics alone, number 1 total offense, number 1 passing offense, number 1 passing quarterback, they've got a 1,000-yard rusher that just tied or broke the school record for most touchdowns by a true freshman. They've got a bunch of dudes on the defensive side of the ball, very opportunistic, much like Oklahoma State was in 2011. Bend but don't break, right? We've heard that terminology quite a bit. And when it comes to turnovers and the turnover differential, they're top 3, top 5, top 7 nationally, not just at the G5 level, but they're up there with the Alabamas and the Ole Misses and the Georgias of the world in these statistical categories. And he's been doing it for multiple years now with multiple different quarterbacks. Heck, people even tend to forget he's primarily responsible for the biggest leap in development for Chandler Morris. Yeah, he did some things at TCU, goes to North Texas, kind of revolutionizes his career, goes to Virginia, and now has Virginia playing like a competent football team. That, again, was the Eric Morris effect. So how somebody can calculate that Eric Morris is a C anything is absolutely insane. If Eric Morris didn't bring Drew Mestemaker, didn't bring Caleb Hawkins, didn't bring Wyatt Young, didn't bring some of the best defenders on the defensive side of the ball, wasn't bringing Skylar Cassidy. If none of that was the case, Eric Morris by himself would be above a C+. Like, what are we doing? Statistics typically are supposed to matter. Just like strength of schedule, things of that nature are supposed to matter. How can you look at the success that Eric Morris has had at multiple stops, whether it be Washington State, Texas Tech, head man at Incarnate Word, head man at North Texas, doing all of this with 1.5, 1.8 mil, and then decide that he's a C+? That's insanity. And then if you factor in, if he brings all of his coordinators, which all indications are, at least like 95-ish% are trying to get their way to Stillwater, Oklahoma, or they're being convinced to get their way to Stillwater, America, it only makes sense that they bring a decent chunk of the roster with him. So without the players, he's above a C+. If you factor in all of the players, all of the coaches, and the GM, it's absolutely asinine that Eric Morris is not being talked about more. And you and I both know this, everyone that's listening. If Eric Morris was going to LSU or Florida, he would be an A++. If there was common knowledge that Eric Morris was going to go to, say, even Auburn or Arkansas with a plethora of the players that are responsible for this 10-1 season, he would automatically be an A+. I'm so tired. We're all getting so tired of the constant SEC propaganda, and you're seeing it. Rankings don't necessarily matter until they do. And you're seeing the RPI wins against this, that, and the other. It's all fluffy stuff for the SEC. And this is yet another indication of just that. If Eric Morris was going somewhere other than Oklahoma State, this evaluation would be viewed entirely differently. But it is what it is. The propaganda machine must churn, it must pump out, and it must throw down any Big 12 school, including BYU. However, BYU might have some things against them that is pretty damning for the CFP committee. Before we get to that, we got to talk about Omaha Steaks. The holiday season is here, and it's going to feel a lot easier when you already know what the perfect gift is, and the perfect gift is Omaha Steaks. Whether you're treating yourself or you're sending someone memorable to family and friends, make sure it's Omaha Steaks because they deliver handcrafted perfection right to the front door. And this week is going to be the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. The quality is exactly what you're hoping for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting or a weeknight cooking so much easier. The variety is extremely underrated. Steaks, burgers, comfort meals, sides, desserts. They've got all of it for you. Honestly, it's kind of the best gift that you can physically possibly get. It keeps on giving, at least to your stomach, and you don't need anyone's sizes to make that order. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during the cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use a promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That is omahasteaks.com. Make sure that you use that promo code COLLEGE. Terms and conditions apply. Make sure that you see site for details. Get Omaha Steaks either for yourself or for someone else. It'll be the best holiday gift decision that you make. Oh, BYU. Things have been cooking and churning in Provo, Utah. And there are some parallels because Oklahoma State fans are kind of concerned about some of these commits being told that they need to reopen their commitment. And what does that mean for Oklahoma State's 2026 recruiting class X, Y, and Z, right? But BYU might actually not have the same ability to get to the CFP as North Texas. As it sits right now, BYU is likely going to get screwed somehow. So the best hope for the Big 12 is that BYU beats Texas Tech, because it does appear as though, or seem as though, Texas Tech's a shoe-in no matter what happens, right? So the best of both worlds would be BYU to beat Texas Tech, so that way we can get two teams in to the CFP conversation. But if there's any trepidation surrounding Kalani Sitake being the head man at BYU in the future, then you and I both know if that does come to fruition, that will be the public justification for why BYU gets left out. If BYU beats Texas Tech and Kalani Sitake is to take a job at, say, a Penn State, they would use that against BYU. There's no chance that they get in if Kalani Sitake takes a job elsewhere. Furthermore, this is absolutely madness by the athletic director. I understand he's a basketball dude, and you want to heavily invest in basketball, which is great. You got the best player in the country. Massive for BYU. But you're a football brand. What are we talking about? We want to see BYU in the Final Four for basketball, 100%. But if the athletic director is so full of himself that he's going to allow Kalani Sitake to kick rocks, maybe he should be put out on the rail station and sent to the other side of the country. That is absolute madness. There's a massive differentiation between what happened in Mike Gundy and what is currently happening at BYU for Kalani Sitake, and even to some degree, Kyle Whittingham, right? All indications have been that Kyle Whittingham couldn't stomach what happened last year, had to come back for redemption, essentially got his redemption, and is likely set to retire. It should be Morgan Scalley, the head coach in waiting, that takes over. If that happens, it should be a fairly seamless transition. BYU, I don't think that's the case. I mean, yes, you could promote Jay Hill, and that would be very popular, and the players would love it, and it would probably be pretty daggone seamless, but it would be used against them wholeheartedly. So hopefully the athletic director pulls his head out of his wazoo and convinces Kalani Sitake that you need to stay at BYU. You are BYU. Because it's crazy to me to think that they would allow Kalani Sitake to bounce. Like, you're in the midst of a CFP bid. You were in the midst of one last year as well. This is 2 years in a row. You're 2 years in the conference, and you're right on that cusp. If Kalani Sitake does take a job at a Penn State, they will use that against BYU. And I don't know how long it would take for BYU to be put in the same position once again. I think that that's a massive black eye on BYU. Because if you have any chance of getting into the playoffs, it's with Kalani Sitake on the sidelines. Any chance. So if Kalani Sitake is pushed out of the door after back-to-back seasons of being really close to CFP territory, that typically is an athletic director trying to be above himself. I think all of us have realized by now that you just merely rent the whistle as a coach. It's not going to be yours forever. Mike Gundy lasted 21 years. Kyle Whittingham, 21 years. Those are clearly the outliers, and they began their careers in a completely different generation. So while you're the man with the whistle, you have to continuously put yourself in these positions, and it's already difficult for BYU. It shouldn't be, but I think there's a multitude of things that are viewed negatively with BYU nationally. It's beyond preposterous. But at the same point in time, the last thing they need is instability at the head coach position. So hopefully that athletic director gets some stuff figured out, because there was an emergency meeting called earlier today, and then there's reports that the emergency meeting was canceled. I have been talking to a sideline reporter up there in Provo. So there is some validity to the fact that there's a slightly contentious relationship between Kalani Sitake and the athletic director. If the athletic director thinks he's bigger than the program, that becomes a problem. I think that's partially what happened with Mike Gundy. He thought that he was bigger than the brand of Oklahoma State. And once that happens, it's typically the beginning of the end. So if the athletic director is even entertaining that Kalani Sitake could or should take his talents elsewhere, that's a mistake. That's a major mistake. And that will be used against them in the future as well, because the punditry will say, well, if they couldn't even get into the CFP with their best coach, or their best coach that had them in the CFP conversation didn't even want to be there, then they're not really serious contenders. Unfortunately, I think BYU has to overcome more obstacles than almost every other team in America. All North Texas has to do is beat Tulane, and they will be the highest ranked G5 squad. They will be a conference champion as well. So those two things should catapult them above JMU, just because of the ranking stuff, right? And the fact that they won the American Conference and avenged the Tulane story, that narrative that Tulane is going to win it X, Y, and Z. At the end of the day, I hope BYU gets it figured out. You don't get rid of a coach in their prime. You don't allow a coach to walk in their prime. It's different. If they start having 1 win, 2 win, 3 win seasons, okay, now you gotta move on, and you can't wait too long. But yeah, talk about fumbling the ball. But hopefully the reports are true that the emergency meeting got canceled, because that would lead you to believe that they figured something out. Like, if they called an emergency meeting, that's not typically a good thing. But if they did in fact cancel the emergency meeting like an hour and a half later, that probably does mean it's a good thing, right? So we're all waiting on pins and needles to see what happens in Provo, Utah. All of us in O State country, we got to have faith. We got to have faith in Chad Weiberg making this decision. So if Raj Murdy and Eric Morris are deciding that our current recruiting class isn't quite what they need, it is what it is. And we have to embrace the change and see what it turns into. Anywho, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, you know I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere, so happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe to my podcast. And people, you're the bricks, the bread, the butter. You're everything that makes this work. I appreciate what you do, so go do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave some reviews. All right, y'all. You know what it is. You know the drill. Later, my taters.